Hello and welcome back to the guide series in the Long Dark. My name is Lonelywolf and we're here today to discuss tools in the Long Dark. While this should come across as a fairly straightforward guide, there are some things that new players often struggle with, which is why we're going to cover it. And throughout the game, no matter what difficulty you're playing on, tools will play a very important role in your survival, both in terms of crafting goods and in just ensuring your survival through things like fighting off wolves or starting fires, etc. throughout your day-to-day survival. So there's tools that do different kinds of things, and we've discussed some of them before, and that would be weapons such as the bow or the rifle. But you also have such things as the hacksaw, the hatchet, and the knife. These things all fill a very similar role, but they do it a little bit differently for each item. For example, you can use the knife to assist in crafting different things in the crafting recipes area. For example, they can be used on the moose hide cloak. You see you've got the hatchet or the improvised knife or the improvised hatchet. All of those are essentially the same. Some are ones you craft, the other ones are the ones you find throughout the game. For example, this is the one you can find in the game, and I don't have any of the crafted versions. Crafted versions behave a little bit worse than their non-crafted versions. But anyway, you'll see tools are required to craft different things. So for example, the moose hide satchel only needs a sewing kit or fishing tackle, whereas something like your coats, they need a hatchet or a knife to be done. So tools are very important for crafting items, but tools are also used throughout the game in defense against wolves. When a wolf goes to attack you, you have a quick selection screen where you can pick a weapon. You can pick a hammer, pry bar, knife, hatchet, or bare hands. Now obviously anything's better than just bare hands, but they fall into a little bit of a category of what's the goal you're trying to accomplish. If you're just trying to scare the wolf off, the hammer or the pry bar works. The hammer is better suited to that than the pry bar. It does it far faster and with much greater success. And if you're trying to kill the wolf, the knife does that with far greater success than the hatchet. However, it makes the fight drag on far longer, whereas with the hatchet, it'll get the wolf off a little bit quicker, but it may not inflict bleeding damage. However, most fights, you'll see that it will still inflict the bleeding damage and kill the wolf. Tools are also used throughout the game, such as the hatchet to break wood down. You can use the hatchet on smaller sticks or branches, that is, like this, to turn them into sticks, or in little outcroppings of scrub brushes. Or you can use them on big fallen limbs to turn them into straight up firewood. So if we can find a limb over here out by Grey Mom's house, I will attempt to show you guys. You can also use the hacksaw to cut up some limbs, although not all limbs are equal. Some of them do require the hatchet, and those are the super big limbs. If we come down through here, we should see a limb shortly, although I'm not seeing one, sadly. Normally there is one or two down here you can cut up. And for the sake of my example, it doesn't want to show up, does it? That's just wonderful, as usual. Anyway, we'll find one shortly. But the hatchet can be used as well as the hacksaw to cut down certain limbs. However, some of them will be a bit larger and will require the hatchet. Any sized limb that offers up 3 bits of firewood, either fir or cedar, can be cut down with either the hatchet or the hacksaw. The big ones that carry up to 5 bits of firewood, those ones do require the hatchet to be chopped up. And the times to cut vary depending on the tool used. So if you're using the hatchet, it usually goes by a little bit quicker than if you use the hacksaw. The hacksaw will make it take longer. The knife can be used again in crafting, but it's also used to harvest animals. You can also use the hatchet or the hacksaw to harvest animals. All of them have a differing rate of not success, but of time spent in doing so. So, for example, the knife is oftentimes the quickest choice in cutting up an animal, but perhaps you might want to be saving the knife condition if you're all out of whetstones for something else, such as crafting perhaps, in which case you could use the hatchet or the hacksaw. The benefit of using the hacksaw over either the hatchet or the knife is while these require whetstones to keep up and will eventually run out of whetstones, the hacksaw you can always repair with a box of simple tools or quality tools and some scrap metal. So considering how many shelves and metal items there are that you can potentially break down throughout the game, the hacksaw becomes almost an infinite source of use. However, in the early game, it may behoove you to utilize either the knife or the hatchet for the quicker cut times, or cutting times if you're harvesting an animal. It may behoove you to use those to limit your exposure outdoors. However, that's up to individual playstyle. So as you can see with a limb right here, I can either cut down with the hatchet for 45 minutes and get 3 logs, or I can go for the hacksaw, which doubles the time, but it still gets it cut up. A super large limb, that's not possible. So that's tools in the long dark. Tools will define your playthrough in the long dark, as you'll need them for just about every task you come across, be it collecting firewood unless you rely only on sticks, coal, and other things. You will need the hatchet or the knife, depending on which one you'd rather use, for crafting certain items if you get into crafting. Even if you don't get into crafting, you'll need them to harvest unless you rely fully on the hacksaw. Now, one thing we haven't really mentioned but in passing are the pry bar and the hatchet. Or not the hatchet, the heavy hammer. The pry bar is useful for opening locked containers such as trunks or locked lockers in the long dark. Yeah, the pry bar loses a bit of condition per use, and you can also use it to open up holes in ice fishing huts. You can also use the hatchet, the knife, or the heavy hammer for this as well. The heavy hammer can also be used to break up furniture as well as the hatchet, and you can turn that furniture into reclaimed wood by doing so. And each has their pros and cons. The heavy hammer is simply repaired by using some fir firewood, and sometimes, I believe, although I'll have to double check on that one, and sometimes some scrap metal. So all of these tools have their uses and their place in the long dark and will assist you in your run in survival. But it is good to note that there are different options, and sometimes one choice may be the preferred choice over another. So you'll have to stay on top of that to see what's up. And obviously we got the wolf on us because the door's locked. Anyway, that's tools in the long dark. That's a brief overview of what they are, what they do, what you need to be using them for, and the different things you can use them for. Obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It depends on the difficulty you're playing at, what you have at your disposal, what you prefer to use, compared to what you might just find as useful as a secondary or a backup item. And all of this may be just general advice. You may be thinking, yeah, Lonelywolf, I kind of knew this about the tools. What's your point in your making with this? Your last couple of guides have seemed kind of general in scope. Why is that? And the reason for that being is, as I mentioned just a second ago, it comes down to your play style. What fits into how you play the game. And that's what we're going to be discussing in our next video. That's going to be tying all of this information together. So you're going to be able to take all this general knowledge you have of all these different things in the game and be able to apply it specifically to you and how you play. I think the next set of videos on playstyles, planning, etc. will be super eye-opening for a lot of you guys, and will take it the next step from what you're used to in getting guides from me and maybe from elsewhere on YouTube or from your circles. And it will enable you to be able to survive a lot easier than you have been in the past, or maybe open up your eyes to some new tactics you might not have considered before. So that's tools, that's the general knowledge available on them, and as we go into the next videos to discuss how this knowledge will become more useful to you, I hope it will tie everything together for you guys quite nicely. As always, I've been Lonelywolf. I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe and stay warm out there.